Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Unhitching Hour. How the wall works when your relationship doesn't. My name is Reed Aronson, and I am a divorce lawyer here in Manhattan. The show, for those of you who are new to our show, is about divorce law, family law, teaching people who may be going through something, some major issue in their life, some major life event, what to expect, what's going on, and sort of, maybe you know somebody, maybe you are somebody, and to give them the tools that they may need to help understand what's going on a little bit better. Thank you for joining me. I am, again, flying solo this week. As many of you may know, my wife, my normal, my regular co-host, Vanessa, and I just had our first child. So we're still figuring out the whole how to live this way thing. I'm going to tilt this down just a little bit, and so we're figuring things out. But we didn't want to miss another week of our of the show, and I thought there was a pretty good topic that we could talk about this week. And what is the topic this week? It will be access, custody and access. So, what do I mean when I say custody? Oh, and by the way, just so remember, YouTube page. If you miss any of this episode, you want to watch it again. It's on our YouTube page on Hitching Hour. So go head over there, give us a like, give us a subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Anyway, so this week's topic is access. What is access? So when we talk about custody, right? You hear that word a lot, right? There's a custody fight. Marriage Story, right? Or Kramer versus Kramer, or any of these big things about divorce law is often talking about custody fights because custody is dramatic. Obviously, it deals with children. But when lawyers like me or judges or in those sorts of contexts use the word custody, we mean two things. We mean one of two things or both things. We mean, on the one hand, there is legal custody, which is decision making, right? Who makes the decisions for children, right? Because you have a 10-year-old can't decide whether they should be getting medical treatment or what school they should go to or all those things because they're 10. So somebody's going to have to make that decision. It's usually a parent. But if you have two parents who are not in a relationship anymore, who are at odds, one of them is going to have to make the decision or the other. So that's that. So that's legal custody or decision making. What we're going to be talking about today is physical custody, or also called access, which is who spends time with the kids and when, or the kid and when, right? Who gets the kid Monday night? Who gets the kid Tuesday night? Who gets weekends? Who gets that sort of a thing? That's access, and that's what we're going to be talking about in a little bit of surface, but a little bit of depth today. And I've got an interesting case that we're going to discuss a little bit at the back end. But first, I'd like to just go over the vocabulary a little bit. The vocabulary. So when we are thinking about it as divorce lawyers, when we are sort of conceptualizing a custody schedule, right? Who's going to get the kids? When are you going to get the kids? We think about it in terms of a 2-week cycle. 2-week cycle, so 14 nights. And we're always thinking about things in terms of nights, overnights, even though there might be dinners or day visits, but really it's about overnights. And we think about it in terms of a 14-day cycle. So let's say that you have a parent who has the kids Monday night, Tuesday night, Thursday night, and then the other parent has them Wednesday night, and then they alternate weekends. So let's look at the parent who has the Wednesday night. So the parent has every Wednesday night, so that's 2 nights, plus the alternating weekend, which is 3 nights. So that would be 5 nights out of 14. So that'd be a 5 out of 14 schedule. Now, if you added an alternating night every other week, so let's say they got Wednesday and every other Thursday, they would then have 6 out of 14. And then if you gave them every Thursday instead of every other Thursday, they would now have 7 out of 14, or a 50-50 schedule. And that's how we think about things. We think about sort of looking at it from that perspective, and then saying, okay, well, what kind of a schedule do you want, right? When we're talking about things in broad terms, what kind of a schedule do you want? Well, he thinks he should be 50-50. Oh, well, I think he should really only be 5 out of 14, or 6 out of 14, or 4 out of 14. So thinking about in those terms, right? a number of nights out of 14. It used to be, even when I was even when I was a child, right? That recently, maybe not that recently, but relatively recently, not in a terribly distant past. There was still the notion that children should have what was called a home base, that for the most part, if not every night, almost every night, children should go home to the same bed in the same place, do their homework at the same desk, eat at the same dinner table, and that was really important. And what that tended to lead to, in addition to, I'm sure some gender assumptions are right about caretaking, and the women are the ones who take care of the kids, and the men are the ones who don't. You would have very, very lopsided schedules. So you would have, maybe a Saturday night, the father, and again, it's very gendered, but you'd have the father would have maybe a Saturday night, maybe Saturday and Sunday, maybe Friday and Saturday, plus an alternating, a dinner visit once a week or every other week. So you'd be talking about maybe a 2 out of 14 or a 1 out of 14 plus a dinner. And that was something of the norm. That is no longer the case anymore at all. Even absent some real unfitness, and when I say unfit in this context, I don't necessarily mean abuse or even neglect, but just absent some real reason to say this person really shouldn't have that much time. 5 out of 14 is about as low as you get in New York, in my experience, and I'm sure different states are different, and different places are different, and different families are different. So it's not necessarily that works that way all the time. But that's sort of the 5 out of 14 is kind of the bottom of where you start. 6 out of 14 is usually where you're going to end up in most cases, right? Not maybe not most cases, but 6 out of 14 is sort of normal. Even doesn't happen that often, but it's not as unheard of as it used to be. You don't have this sort of notion of like one parent is the parent and the other parent gets a little bit. It's really much more equal. It's much more egalitarian. The notion has really changed from how it used to be about home base, right? Home base, to more about making sure that the children feel like they have a strong relationship with both parents. And one of the ways that you have a strong relationship is by doing all of the things that are kind of impossible if you have a very restricted schedule. It's not really possible to have, one of the things. What are the things that your parents do for you? They help you with your homework, right? Well, if you're never really at one parent's house at night, other than for maybe dinner, or even then maybe you're at a restaurant, you're not going to have that experience with that parent. Putting kids to bed, even as kids get older, that's still a thing. That relationship, building those relationships, that having the sense of, oh, okay, I'm coming home from school, I'm going to dad's tonight, or I'm going to mom's tonight, or and by the way, also, and I'm going to a place where I have clothing, where I have my toothbrush, where I have my video games, where I have my place that I do my homework, sort of making sure that is as equal as is reasonably possible. Now you get sometimes, especially if the history of the relationship has been such that and this is still the case today, even as we move to a more, I think lots of people would quote the statistics about how even in our society where most households are two-income households, that women still have the lion's share of these sorts of things, the domestic tasks, right? The taking care of the house, raising the children, those sorts of things. I'm not saying that as what I think ought to be the case, but just I think what social sciences would tell you is the case. So women still tend to take up that caretaking role more often than men, but it's not 100% of the time. But when you have that sort of lopsided relationship, right? One of the parents is the stay-at-home parent or just the primary caregiver, and the other parent has not been in the history of the relationship. There will sometimes be a reluctance on behalf of the parent who's been the caretaker to want to move to a schedule like that, to say, well, how can she, let's say it's a stay-at-home dad, right? Well, she's never taken care of the kids like that. She's never been the one who did the homework with the kids. She's never been the one who made sure that the kids got home from play recital or play rehearsal or whatever, right? That's never been the case. I think what the idea is, well, that was then. That was when you were an intact family, an intact couple. And now that you're not, both of you are going to have to figure out, right? Both of you are going to have to figure out how your lives look now that things have changed. So that sometimes creates a reluctance, but the notion is still, look, we're trying to get to a place where things are more fair, things are not fair, but things are more even, more equal, because we believe to the extent that's possible, it's in the best interest of the children. Now, what one of the things that is what does a 50-50 schedule look like? So you say 7 out of 14, right? A 50-50 schedule. What would that look like? And there's a couple of different ways that people do it. One way that people talk about a lot is like a week on, week off, right? So I have them week one, you have them week two. I get them back week one, you get them back week two, and so on and so forth through the cycle. The advantage of this, and I'll talk about it a little bit. The advantage of this is that it reduces the number of handoffs, right? It reduces the transition, right? The kids know where they're always, they know I'm going to be there for the whole week. I don't have to worry about, where am I going to be going tomorrow as opposed to today. So it's fewer transitions. It keeps things a little bit simple. The disadvantage of it is it means that each parent goes, it's a long time to go a whole week without seeing one of your parents. And that, somewhat takes away from the notion of like, well, each parent has their own, making sure that relationship stays strong with both parents. So some people like that, but there's some resistance to it. The other way that it tends to be done is with what's called a 5-2-2-5 wrap. 5-2-2-5 wrap. And how does that look? So imagine parent one has Monday and Tuesday night. Parent two has Wednesday and Thursday night. And then they alternate Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So what that means in practice is that if you're looking at the schedule from the perspective of each parent, right? One parent gets 5 nights in a row. Then the other parent gets 2 nights. Then the other parent gets 2 nights. Then the other parent. So parent 1 gets 2 nights. Parent 2 gets 5 nights. Parent 1 gets 2 nights. Parent 2 gets 2 nights. And then parent 1 gets 5. So you end up with 5-2-2-5, 5-2-2-5, this sort of repeating pattern of the kid is with one parent for 5 nights, one parent for 2, one parent for 2, and then the other parent for 5. And this is sort of a bit of a best of both worlds, right? So that you're not the kids aren't switching back and forth too often. There's some consistency, right? So they know, okay, Monday night I go home to dad, or Monday night I go home to mom. Tuesday night, there's some consistency in that. It helps in terms of things like extracurricular activities, right? Because one of the things that parents sometimes fight about is, wait a minute, why did you schedule, little Billy for baseball on that baseball plays Thursday nights and Thursday night's my night, or if we alternate weeks, right? I have every other Thursday night, and I don't want him playing baseball on my time. So it allows a little bit the parents to say, okay, well, Thursday nights every week is my night, as opposed to alternating and swapping. And that you don't have these really long, full week-long stretches where the parents don't see the kids. Okay. So there's that. Transitions. How do you deal with things like, okay, you're gonna have the kid gets swapped. Ideally, you want to avoid as many face-to-face transitions as possible. So you want to avoid as much as possible one parent having to take the kid from where they live to where the other parent lives and leaving them there. Now, it's inevitable. There's no way to completely avoid it, but you want to minimize it. Ideally, as many transitions as possible happen in the drop-off to school and the pickup from school. So in my 5-2-2-5 wrap example, right? So one parent gets has Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. They will then leave the kid at school or drop the kid off at school or get the kid on the bus or whatever for Monday morning at school. And then the other parent will then pick them up or get them after school ends or extracurricular activities end or whatever on Monday night. And this is good because first of all, it means that the kids have fewer trips, right? Because if it means the kid doesn't have to come home from school, then pack themselves up to go and make another trip to the other parent. It means that the parents have less interaction. Now, hopefully, that's not a big problem. Ideally, obviously, it's amicable and the parents don't have a problem. But a lot of cases, I'm sure you would imagine, have that problem, and you can avoid as much contact with each other as possible. So you want to make transitions happen not at the parents' homes, but at the activities that the kids have. Vacations. Okay, so this is often a big one of the things that are ultimately create a lot of stickiness are vacations, holidays, because of the sentiment of it, the especially I would say a lot of the time if you have an interfaith couple, right? So let's say that mom's Catholic and dad's Jewish. Um, you know, does that mean that only the Catholic parent gets Christmas? But Christmas is a nice holiday, right? It's a nice holiday for everybody. On the other hand, shouldn't the child be with the father for the Jewish high holidays? But on the other hand, the Catholic mother might say, "Look, but it's still an important day, right? It still matters." So that often becomes sticky, and sometimes there's really no way, there's no good rule of thumb. You just kind of have to look at the circumstances and try and come to a good agreement. In general, what you try and do is you set it up so that we kind of know based on school schedules, based on history, what the holiday schedule looks like. You're going to have Labor Day, you're going to have Columbus Day, you're going to have Veterans Day, you're going to have Martin Luther King, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these are sort of long weekends. You usually, there's two ways to do it. Either you say, okay, we're going to fix which parent gets Martin Luther King weekend every year, right? And dad gets it in even years, mom gets it in odd years. And I hope everybody knows that by using mom and dad, I'm not obviously same sex couples. It would work exactly the same way. There's no gender. It's just easier to say mom and dad as opposed to mom one and mom two or dad one and dad two. Um, so you could do it that way. You could fix it. You could say, okay, I get, or you can. A lot of the time, what they'll just say is, look, whichever parent happens to have that weekend, right? Whoever alternating weekend Martin Luther King weekend happens to fall on, they get it, and that's just how it's going to work. This, you run the risk of maybe it doesn't work out very much. Maybe one year it's really unfair towards one parent or unfair towards another. Maybe you are a family that I care much more about Memorial Day, and I'd rather have more Memorial Days. But this is an option. Sometimes, and it just depends on how families want to do it. You can set it up and you can say the rule is that you can never get 2 weekends in a row, or three weekends in a row. So if you get your normal weekend on weekend one, Martin Luther King is yours because that's what we agreed to. It's an even year and you get Martin Luther King. That's weekend two. Oftentimes what an agreement will then say is, okay, but if you get 2 weekends in a row, then we start over. It's not that now you get this because right, this was right. No, excuse me, sorry. Let me be clear. I'm talking fast. But normally it would be parent A on weekend one, parent B on weekend two, and parent A on weekend three, alternating. But let's say your agreement says that this weekend Martin Luther King is for parent A. Then you'd have a situation where it would be parent A, parent A, parent A. So what you'd do is you'd write in a clause in the agreement that would say, okay, if there's ever a situation where one parent is going to get 3 weekends in a row, what we'll do is we'll back that off and we'll say instead the schedule restarts where parent B gets weekend three, and then parent A, parent B, and so on and so forth. So you sort of restart the rotation. And that's a way of dealing with some of that the unevenness that might come with setting things up that way. Summer. Usually, summer is you're going to have a little bit of a different thing. You're going to want fewer transitions. There's going to be vacations. There's going to be summer camps. It's hard to make any sort of hard and fast rule about how summer's going to work. It really depends on how your family works, right? If your family has summer camp, then you're not going to have that many. Right? So if you do summer camp, and then each parent gets 2 weeks of vacation, assuming you can um, fit that in, it's going to make it it's you're not going to have much other time, right? Other than summer camp and these vacations, so you don't necessarily have to worry about who has them on any given day. Sometimes you just stick with the same calendar that you have during the year. Sometimes you might want to say, look, let's go with a week on, week off. It really just depends on your needs and the family's needs. And then the big holidays, right? So big school vacations, Christmas or winter break, spring break, Easter, those sort of long, chunky vacations. Usually you're either splitting them in half or one parent's taking one and the other parent's taking the other. Again, it's just about preference. So we have a question from my normal co-host. While I can see how making transitions at school/activities eliminates some issues, it also feels like it could create more logistical issues. What if a child has a favorite teddy bear they want to bring back and forth, or medication, or a gym uniform, or science fair project? It's a good question. It's a good question, and what you're talking. Look, so let's talk about things like teddy bears, right? One of the points I made earlier is that you really want to. What about if a baby is nursing? That's another great question. I want to put that to one side, but let's talk about the teddy bear sort of issue. One of the things you want to make sure is that each parent's house or home feels like the child's home. So you don't want to have a situation where every time the child moves from one place to the other, right, they've got to pack up a suitcase. So I gotta pack up all my clothing. I gotta put it in the bag. I gotta pick it up. I gotta bring it. I gotta get a toothbrush. I gotta get toothpaste. I gotta get shampoo because then it's gonna feel like a chore and not like home. Now, if there's an item like a teddy bear, right? Obviously, it's hard to have multiples of those. So you just make space and make sure the kid has a teddy bear. Science fair project, right? This is sometimes things like that. You just have to have communication between the parents, and they just need to be able to talk to each other, and hopefully, you'll be able to switch things like that. But you're right. There's no perfect solution. Medication's a good one. You need to make sure that the kid has medication in both places. This is an important thing, and for obvious reasons, because kids are forgetful, things happen, you lose things. You want to make sure that the kids have access to medications in both places. If that means that the kid has a go bag, right, with their teddy bear and their medications in it, and they just bring that both back and forth, sometimes you have to make that sacrifice. But the goal should be always to have each house or each home feel like not just, okay, I'm going to be at dad's or I'm going to be at mom's, but I'm going to be at my home, at my other home. Okay, so what about if a baby is nursing? And I thank you for that question because it brings us to our case for the day. There is this case. So one of the things that I've been talking about, pick up at school, or drop off at school, pick up at after activities, and all those sorts of things make a tremendous amount of sense if your kids are 13, 14, 15, 12, those sorts of ages, right? Adolescence through 18. But what about real little babies? What about real little babies? How do these sorts of things make sense? And I think this case that I'm going to talk about is pretty illustrative of that. And hold on, because I've lost it. But so just give me a sec. So in any event, I can't remember the name of it. I apologize. Let me just pull it up. Here we go. So the case is called AS versus NS, and it's from January 31 of 2020, and it's from Manhattan. And in this case, what happened was something I had never seen before, which was a custody application that was made for a child who wasn't yet born. So this child was not even born and the father brings a an action in court seeking basically full custody of the child, full access, saying I want to basically I want to go to the hospital when the kid is born. I want to bring him or her home from the hospital, and then the mother can have uh, what's called supervised access. So can see the kid, but only if there's a social worker there or somebody there to watch. And the basis for this was that they had already had two kids together. So this the unborn child was their third child. They had already had two kids together, and because of actions of the mother, that was the situation. The supervised visitation was already in place for the other two children. So the father had all the time, had full time custody with the two older children, and the mother only got to see them with supervision on a very fixed, truncated schedule. And so the father went in and said, "Look, the same thing that put the other two in danger are going to put this baby in danger, and therefore we need to make sure that the the child is protected, and that's the best place, the safest place is with me." However, my lovely wife points out, what about nursing? So there's actually, in this case, the judge goes through it, has a number of expert witnesses who all talk about, interestingly, the health benefits of breastfeeding and the importance of establishing breastfeeding in the early part of a child's life. And talking about all of those benefits and how if you don't breastfeed for the first couple of months. Now, understand, I'm just talking about the case. I'm not, I'm not making a judgment call here. I know that obviously that's a very, I know now from personal experience that it's a very difficult decision about, the benefits of breastfeeding versus the benefits of doing other things, of bottle feeding or formula, all those things. But the judge has expert witnesses come in who discuss all of these things. And ultimately, and but the father says, wait a minute, how is that not gender bias? How is that not gender bias? If the situation were reversed, and I, as the father, had already had these two kids taken out of my care and put in the care of the mother, there's no way you'd think about, well, he's got to have some time. So how is this not bias? And ultimately, what the judge says is no. The judge says no. There are benefits of breastfeeding that are real, that may be associated with gender, but are not about gender. They're just about the practicality of who can do it and who can't. And I'm not going and I'm not going to make an order that is going to have this effect of basically preventing breastfeeding going forward. And he says, well, doesn't that mean that you're basically privileging breastfeeding over these other safety concerns? And the judge wrestles with that. But the judge ultimately calls a number of witnesses psychiatrists who talk to the mother, other things, and who ultimately decides, look, I understand that there's a risk, but talking to these medical professionals, talking to these psychiatrists who have spoken with her, who have worked with the mother, I think it's safe. And so on balance for the initial period, I think we're not going to impose the same schedule with this baby that we have with the two older children. And ultimately, what the judge decides, and I apologize that these aren't queued up. I had planned on having them queued up, but because of my technical issues, they're a little bit difficult. But here, so the judge. Here's what the judge orders: until such time as the child is 2 months old, the father shall have 2 3-hour visits with the child per day, such that the mother is not away from the child more than 9 consecutive hours. If the party, so that's first. So there's a schedule for the first 2 months of basically these 2 3-hour visits per day, and the mother's got to be with him not more than 9 consecutive hours away. Beginning March 21st. So by the way, the child is not yet born. beginning March 21st up until April 20th, 2020. The father's visit shall increase by 1 hour per visit for a total of 2 4-hour visits. Then, beginning in April, so a month later, the father's access shall be increased to 1 8-hour block of time. And then that increases by 2 hours every 2 weeks thereafter. So basically, in acknowledgement of nursing, of the importance of that, of the issues of that, the the judge really focuses and creates this very specific calendar for them, which starts with him having these 3-hour blocks and then slowly but surely ramps up until he's got really, very regular visitation with the baby. So, to answer your question, Vanessa, if the baby, little children are going to be looked at and treated differently for basically biological reasons. And remember, everything in custody, whether it's access, whether it's decision making, whatever it is always about the best interest of the child. And in this case, despite the concerns about that, the best interests of the child were served here by being able to basically breastfeed on more or less on demand and being with the mother most of the time. So that's an interesting case. It's not one I've never seen a situation like that before. And again, I think it was something of a, normally because, obviously it's a bit difficult to assess the needs of a child before it's born. I think this was something unique because of the, these other two children and the issues with them, but it's still an interesting, for if you are a parent of a very young child, I'm sure that I imagine that cases in the future will cite it. And because of this long discussion about the importance of basically a child being with its mother, its biological mother in the first months of its life and having that opportunity. And I'll point out just one thing, by the way. There was no dispute between the parents as to whether breastfeeding was a good thing or not. So it wasn't that certainly was not that the judge was imposing breastfeeding. The judge wasn't ordering the mother to breastfeed, or even saying to the father, if the father didn't want breastfeeding, that wasn't okay. They agreed. It was just sort of a question of how does that factor, how does the importance of it rank in comparison to these other concerns. We have a question. Breastfeeding aside, is the schedule for a baby the same as for older children? And I can't. I think generally the answer is no. I think generally the perception is that a baby needs to be able to feed on demand, and it's. But I don't know if you took breastfeeding out. I'll be honest. I'm not sure I know of a case, and I might have people who are watching or who know of a case that can talk about this. But I'm not sure I can think of a case off the top of my head where breastfeeding wasn't at least part of the schedule. And look, like I said, a lot of the time you want to do drop off at school, but a really little baby, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't really work. A really little baby, I'm not sure you want a really little baby to be moving back and forth, given what's going on with immune systems and all that sort of stuff. So I would say that babies are going to be not treated the same way as a 13-year-old, for obvious reasons, even without the breastfeeding. But I can't cite you a case. Maybe somebody out there can give me a citation, and I'll put it in the notes on the YouTube page. All right, so I think that's going to be our show, since I don't see any other questions. That's going to be our show for today. A little bit sort of a bit of a taste of the basics of access, plus this interesting wrinkle issue, and very interesting case. Thank you for joining us. Again, this is the Unhitching Hour. My name is Reed Aronson. Please go check out our YouTube page. If you've missed any part of this episode, if you've missed any part of any previous episodes and want to check them out, if you'd like to suggest a topic for a future episode, you can reach us at unhitchinghour@gmail.com. We'll read your email if you have a question that you didn't feel comfortable putting on Facebook Live. Anyway, that's been our show. Thank you for joining us, and I hope we will see you next week, when we'll have I think we'll be back to full strength with our animation and a whole thing. So thank you for joining us.